Humans are dreamers, not realists. And this is often an honorable quality. Our imagination is what propels societies forward. Yet, more and more, dreaming seems to be a convenient way of avoiding the reality of our situation. In his lecture-turned book, The Great Derangement, the Indian writer and one of my favorite novelists, Amitav Ghosh, highlights a number of uneasy truths. They're not easy to read or to comprehend. And this segment is not easy either, to write, to listen to, but I don't see any value in avoiding it. At the beginning of his talk, Ghosh points out the uniqueness of this moment in history into perspective. At the beginning of his talk, Ghosh puts the uniqueness of this moment in history into perspective. Quote, "The humans of the future will surely understand, knowing what they presumably will know about the history of their forebears on Earth, that only in one very brief era, lasting less than 3 centuries, did a significant number of their kind believe that planets and asteroids are inert." Now, inertia wasn't exactly the sentiment I experienced for decades inside of yoga studios or read about on wellness blogs. The American spiritual community is much more ambitious. If anything, the take on reality inside of these closed environments is even stranger. The notion that the planet is beneficent or that the universe is ready to bestow abundance on us only if we seek it properly, with humility and earnestness, with prayer and mantra, by rolling beads around 108 times around our anxious fingers. The problem is that's not who we are outside of those spaces. In general, we act like the friend who drops in and raids the fridge while refusing to wash the dishes and pretend that the cupboards will always be filled. We don't seem to recognize how short this period of excess that we have lived through really is, or that it's coming to an end. Yet we've mercilessly exploited it and continue to demand more. The endless stream of Amazon packages, the cars that transport us to grocery stores, jet setting on a gypsy lifestyle lived out on Instagram with the promise that everyone can tax the environment without paying a toll.
So, Derek, just to interrupt for a second, isn't the overpopulation argument, isn't that really about inequality of consumption, as you're speaking about Amazon and, cars and grocery stores? That like somehow if we could get the global north to downsize everything, there would be no resource issue? I mean, not that we shouldn't work at that or dream about it, but does the math not work out on that idea?
Mother Jones did a report about 8 or 9 years ago, I remember reading, where they said that if everyone lived a middle-class American lifestyle, that the entire continent of Africa and all of Asia could not actually, there weren't enough resources to support that type of lifestyle. So if you're looking at the middle of the road American lifestyle, you're talking about $62,000 a year for a family of 4. And you're talking about indoor climate control, having AC or heating. You're talking about having cars, 1 or 2 cars. So if that is the model you're working with, then it is true there are not enough resources in the world to accommodate that. So what you're actually asking for by saying it's a myth is you're actually saying the predominant number of Americans would have to downsize, lose the cars, lose perhaps some of the refrigeration, the processes, the supply chain management. You would have to lose indoor climate control, which is a big one. So that would be a real sort of downsizing. And I'm generally going to think that a lot of the audience that talks about this as a myth has those conveniences. And so you have to wonder if they are really truly willing to sacrifice that to see through their philosophy.
Well, they don't vote for austerity. I mean, we know that. But what about, so wait a minute, you said, what did you say? You said Gypsy Lifestyle? Is that that's not, that's like in air quotes, right? Or are you quoting influencers?
I am quoting, what is there, Gypset Lifestyle. Yeah, it's this actually is, that was ironic, absolutely. And
right.
because to To put it mildly, the term gypsy is basically, if you're in parts of Europe or in South Asia, it's like using the N word in America. But in the American wellness community, it's not treated like that at all. It's often seen as this like ambitious, glorious, nomadic lifestyle. It's a derogatory slang.
Yeah, bohemian.
Yeah, bohemian.
Right.
It's a derogatory slang. And what's funny is I will sometimes notice people like talking about, I'll put this in air quotes too, but certain cancel culture sort of topics. And in their blog, they call themselves a gypsy without realizing they were actually talking about the Roma people who probably came from India and then traveled up through the Balkans and throughout Asia. Throughout Eastern Europe predominantly, but the Roma exist in Italy, Spain. They're all over Europe, and part of that reason is because they've been oppressed in so many different societies. Now, to be fair, some of the Roma call themselves gypsies in the same way that American hip hop will use the N-word as embracing that term. But overall, if you're going to use that term, it's actually a derogatory word against the Roma, and a lot of people take it seriously. But that's a high bar for entry for a lot of American wellness practitioners.
Well, and a lot of those people take it really seriously because of the history of genocide and oppression and discrimination throughout Europe. Yeah.
Oh yeah, throughout Europe, throughout Asia. I mean, the Roma have been oppressed pretty much everywhere they go, and it still continues to this day. There are active genocides of Roma attempting to, occurring. And the same with the Tuareg people in North Africa. Like, this is not something that is in the past. It's happening right now.
I really liked what you said about, we have this idealized vision of holistic life that exists inside the studio, and that's not who we are outside. That, we're going out to the parking lot and we're getting back into cars after doing spiritual stretches and all that. And I often have the impression that we create those interior environments as part of a kind of that it's like a very efficient way of soothing a particular kind of anxiety, to be able to take the same materials that you would build your Whole Foods out of, or even an upscale strip mall or something like that, and you build a yoga studio, and then you call that a holistic space. I think it's a way of sanctifying the means of production that are already in full flow, already destroying the planet, but without really having the same punch, or at least convincing yourself that you've blessed them otherwise, like this is a sacred space.
I'll never forget a little studio here in Santa Monica that was on the second floor of sort of an office building, and they built it with this heating system that was environmentally friendly because it had little channels of water that ran through the wood floor, and it would send water that was being heated up by the water heater through the little channels. And so it was not using resources that would hurt the environment, supposedly. Did
they run hot yoga in that studio?
No.
Right.
No, not super hot yoga, but that was sort of their heating system. And then they had some kind of, very, very fancy, obviously quite expensive air circulation mechanism above that was also sort of made of, hemp and repurposed wood or something.
Bamboo wood, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be that. Yeah, I mean, if you think about that basic aesthetic that you see on the cover of any yoga journal magazine, we have these appeals to minimalism, to rustic finishes, but also neat finishes, and this feeling that this is not, and the feeling that this is not a consumer exercise, and that these are not consumption heavy environments. I think we're always stretching for a kind of minimalism in the way in which wellness is presented that gives this kind of 19th century glow to things, as though we're not actually taking jets to get to the places where we, do these very simple, pre-modern practices. I think it's a very, very efficient way of inhabiting a dream, actually.
The hot yoga one gets me especially because we know that that's environmentally unsound. So when it's put forward as a spiritual practice, it's always been sort of a just trigger for